Have you ever stopped to think what climate change was like before global warming? Because I do, on the regular, in fact. Our Earth's surface is warming. A status report written by New Scientist states that the year 2020 was the second warmest year on record, with a mean temperature of 1.2 degrees Celsius above the pre industrial average. The main culprit of this change? Carbon dioxide emissions. As a previous marine biology major at Santa Barbara City College, I have taken several courses that discuss climate change in detail, gaining a vast knowledge of driving forces behind climate change and how to combat them. Today I'm here to urge you in helping bring the United States federal government on board in combating climate change head on by implementing low emission taxiing paths for the commercial airline industry. In order to understand why this proposition is crucial to the longevity of our existence here on Earth, one must understand how CO2 emissions perpetuate climate change, what practices release the most CO2 emissions, how we can combat the release of these CO2 emissions, and what the effects of reducing CO2 emissions looks like. Carbon emissions are the leading cause of climate change. This is because once in the atmosphere, CO2 gases absorb solar energy, keeping that heat close to the Earth's surface rather than letting it escape into the ozone layer and kind of dissipate into space. Trapping of this heat is known as the greenhouse effect, causing unprecedented climate changes, which are bringing about extreme weather, increased wildfires, harsh long summers, and virtually non-existent winters. Carbon dioxide emissions are the primary greenhouse gas behind the greenhouse effect. They make up for about 3/4 of all greenhouse gas emissions. These gases can linger in the atmosphere for thousands of years, as they remain trapped within the Earth's ozone layer. According to a recent National Geographic article, in the year 2018, carbon dioxide levels reached the highest monthly average ever recorded. Carbon dioxide emissions primarily come from burning organic materials such as coal, oil, wood, and solid waste. Carbon dioxide is the most anthropogenic of greenhouse gases because it currently accounts for the greatest portion of the warming associated with human activities, with commercial aircraft transportation being the leading culprit. According to the Environmental and Energy Study Institute, jet fuel consumption produces CO2 at a defined ratio of 3.16 kilograms of CO2 per 1 kilogram of fuel consumed. This results in over 900 million metric tons of CO2 being spewed into our atmosphere annually by the commercial airline industry. If we cut down on CO2 emissions produced by this industry, we can dramatically decrease the trajectory of climate change. This can be done by getting the US federal government's Federal Aviation Administration to utilize resources that already exist. They exist in the form of advanced algorithms that are used for mapping aircraft taxiing pathways. In a study done by the College of Air and Traffic Management and the Civil Aviation University of China, aircraft using these new taxiing pathways created by these algorithms reduced their fuel consumption by 35% and their emissions by a whopping 46%. Since the FFA isn't utilizing these algorithms that are ripe for the taking, laws need to be passed and enforced to ensure that the FAA utilizes these algorithms and ensures the safety of our planet. In order for the aviation bill to be passed, it needs to either go through the House of Representatives or the Senate. Then it's signed into law by the president, and it then goes to the aviation industry or the agency, which will then enact that law. You can help enact this new law by lobbying your senators and House of Representatives to push for the bill to get passed. Phone calls, emails, social media, and any other means of activism will be needed to push these elected officials over the edge and into action. It is also important to build allies with environmental organizations, especially local ones, to ensure that as much pressure as possible will be applied to these politicians. The solutions to reducing commercial airline emissions exist. It's just getting your elected officials to act on something they don't really care much about and to go against oil companies who pay them massive amounts of corporate PAC money. I urge you all to act swiftly in your activism, contact your senators and local state environmental organizations, because we can be the vehicle that brings about this change. The result of getting commercial airlines to comply with optimized taxiing paths means removing over 400 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions from our atmosphere annually. This reduction of CO2 emissions will greatly reduce the effect of climate change and the effects it's having on our planet. The reductions of these emissions will be felt across the globe. I hope I've enlightened you a bit about the dangers of carbon dioxide emissions and their role in climate change. The solution to cutting down emissions exists. It just takes legwork on our end to pressure Washington to elicit change in outdated and inefficient airline taxiing paths. Climate change is our biggest threat today, and carbon emissions are the catalyst of that change. And if we don't provoke a remodeling of these taxiing paths within the commercial airline industry, we're going to have blood on our hands. It will literally be our children who are left scrambling to pick up the pieces of toppled ecosystems and communities that have all been ravaged by climate change. I'm not asking a lot. I'm just asking that you hold those accountable who are responsible for bringing forth the death of our planet. And I implore you all to activism regarding this matter immediately. Thank you.